Have you ever wondered how a person can survive a night at minus 40 degrees Celsius with only their own body and snow to keep them warm? It seems impossible because in the modern world we are used to thinking that without heating and thick walls, life would instantly fade away. However, the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains have existed for centuries in conditions that today would be considered extreme and unfit for life. Their survival in the icy desert was not a miracle or an accident, but the result of centuries of honed skills and a deep understanding of the laws of physics. They did not fight nature, but used its deadly power to create conditions for preserving heat where it would seem only death reigns. Imagine endless white fog, where the wind knocks you off your feet, and you have neither a tent nor the ability to build a large fire. In such conditions, conventional survival knowledge becomes useless and completely different. Sometimes shocking methods come into play. They turn snowdrifts into fortresses and the icy wind into an ally, creating a microclimate in the middle of frozen hell. This story will change your perception of the limits of human endurance and ingenuity. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how Native Americans used the groundhog effect and collective warmth to wake up alive after a night in the epicenter of a snowstorm. Are you ready to learn the truth that the main enemy in the cold is not the cold itself, but movement? It sounds paradoxical, but for the peoples who lived in the harsh climate of the Great Plains and Northern Territories, this was a fundamental rule of survival. Modern man is accustomed to thinking that activity is the best way to keep warm, and that the faster you run or wave your arms, the warmer you get. But this is only true in an urban environment, where it is possible to take shelter, replenish your energy with food, and recover. In the endless expanses of the prairies, any sudden movement was a luxury that the body simply could not afford. For a hunter caught in a blizzard in an open field, unnecessary movement meant not warmth, but a rapid loss of precious calories. The wind and frost sucked energy from the body like predators, and every extra step only accelerated the process. The warriors of the plains knew that such a senseless struggle against nature would lead to death faster than the cold itself. They understood that the human body is a furnace that burns exclusively on internal fuel, and in winter that fuel was limited. Their philosophy of survival was based on the principle of maximum deceleration, almost complete inactivity, in order to conserve heat for as long as possible. They entered a special state resembling deep meditation or even trance-like immobility. Their breathing became slow and shallow so as not to waste oxygen and cool their lungs with cold air. Their heartbeat slowed down, allowing the body to work in economy mode, like a lamp switched to minimum brightness. This skill did not come naturally. It required years of psychological training, cultivated by the harsh nature and experience of their elders. The instinct for self-preservation told them to run, scream, and seek shelter, but the warriors knew that panic was a direct path to death, and immobility was the path to salvation. Instead of fussing, they chose conscious numbness, allowing the cold to surround their bodies but not penetrate the protective cocoon of their clothing. They curled up into a tight ball, hid their faces, covered their hands, and reduced the area of contact with the icy air. The warm air trapped between the layers of leather and fur was their only shield against the night frost, and this shield could not be destroyed by unnecessary movement. This approach saved calories, which were the only source of heat during the long winter nights when there was no fireplace and no firewood to be found. The ability to remain motionless for 10 or 12 hours was considered as important a warrior skill as accurate shooting or the ability to read tracks in the snow. A person became almost a statue, a living sculpture that dissolved into the white landscape. This immobility was not rigid or painful. On the contrary, every muscle was relaxed to avoid tension that could constrict blood vessels and disrupt circulation. Feet, hands, face, everything required constant control and internal attention so that heat would not leave the body. They understood that fighting the wind was useless. No force could overcome the power of the elements, so they learned to submit to it and become part of it. This ability to merge with nature distinguished them from European travelers and soldiers, who most often died of exhaustion or hypothermia while trying their best to keep warm by running and moving. Their bodies burned their last reserves of energy, their hearts worked to the limit, their breathing became ragged, and in the end, their bodies simply gave up. For indigenous peoples, such mistakes were unacceptable, and the culture of survival preserved knowledge that had been passed down for centuries. It was the art of patience, the art of self-control, and a deep understanding of one's body. To some extent, it resembled the ancient practices of yoga or Zen, only born not in temples, but in the icy steppes. It was the ability not to fight the cold, but to interact with it, allowing nature and man to exist in a fragile balance. It was this psychological resilience and ability to maintain inner peace that distinguished them from those who were accustomed to relying on external means of salvation. Do you agree with this? Please tell us what you think about this. Every opinion is valuable. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes about incredible facts of history. What if I told you that snow doesn't actually cool, but warms? We are used to perceiving snow as a source of cold and danger, as a symbol of winter and freezing. But experienced survivalists knew its hidden insulating properties and treated it quite differently. Fresh, loose snow is 90% air, and air trapped in small cavities is one of the best natural insulators. In essence, deep snow acts like a huge mattress made of many air pockets that blocks the wind and maintains a stable temperature. The main thing is not to try to fight the snow, but to learn how to hide in it properly. When caught in a blizzard without the ability to set up tents or build a normal shelter, people did not waste their energy clearing the ground of snow and building a fire on bare soil. On the contrary, they used the snow as a ready-made building material that was already at their feet. Hunters looked for deep snowdrifts or dense accumulations formed in ravines, behind large boulders, near riverbanks, or among thickets of bushes to burrow into them like animals into their dens. This was not an act of desperation, but a well-developed survival tactic. It was important to find not loose powder snow, but snow that had already settled a little under the influence of the wind. The warrior began to dig a narrow trench or burrow, working quickly but carefully, trying to disturb the dense structure of the surrounding snow as little as possible. Sometimes he simply pressed his body into a snowdrift and then widened the cavity with his hands or a simple tool. The dimensions of such a shelter were strictly calculated. It had to be just large enough to accommodate a person and not a centimeter more. The less empty air inside, the faster this volume would be warmed by body heat and breath. Too much space would require too much energy to heat and would be an unaffordable luxury in conditions where every calorie counts. The walls of snow provided reliable protection from the biting wind, which was the main cause of hypothermia in open spaces, rather than the frost itself. The wind, capable of blowing the warmth out of any clothing in a matter of minutes, broke against the snow barrier, leaving the shelter almost completely silent and the air motionless. There were no drafts inside, which meant that the body did not lose heat as quickly. Such a burrow was often covered with skins, branches, or even a raincoat if available, creating a closed air pocket. Sometimes the entrance was simply partially covered with snow, leaving a narrow gap for air. Inside such a snow shelter, the temperature could remain around 0 degrees, even if it was 40 degrees below zero outside and hurricane-force winds were howling. For a person exhausted by the cold, this difference of 30 to 40 degrees was enormous and literally became the line between life and death. The heat emanating from the breath and body did not escape into the boundless atmosphere, but was reflected off the snow walls and remained below, slowly warming a small volume. The snow near the face and torso melted slightly from the warm air and then froze again, forming a thin crust of ice. This layer of ice sealed the temporary dwelling even better, making it stronger and warmer. At the same time, it was important not to forget about breathing. Even in such a cramped snow burrow, people tried to leave a small channel for fresh air to enter so as not to suffocate. They knew that carbon dioxide was heavier, so they tried to keep their heads closer to the entrance or a small crack at the top. The ability to properly regulate the airflow was as important as the ability to quickly dig the burrow itself. They were not afraid of being buried under the snow because they knew from childhood how it behaved, how it held up when it collapsed, and how long such a structure could withstand. The ability to quickly and correctly build such a snow grave was a basic skill that was learned from an early age, long before a boy was taken on his first big winter hike. The name sounded grim, but in essence, such a shelter was not a grave, but a temporary cradle in which a person waited out the most dangerous period of the storm. For those who did not understand the principles of how snow works, the idea of voluntarily burying oneself in a snowdrift seemed insane. But for an experienced hunter, it was the only right decision. It was a temporary but effective fortress, erected in a matter of minutes amid the raging chaos of a winter night. Thus, the very element that threatened to kill the traveler became his only reliable shield and shelter, if he knew how to use it correctly. The cold snow, feared by unprepared people, turned into a warm shell as soon as a person accepted its rules of the game. Survival was not about fighting nature, but working with it. Do you think you could psychologically cope with spending the night in such a cramped snow cave, with the wind howling around you and only a thin layer of snow above your head? In the next chapter, you will learn how clothing became a second skin and worked like a thermos. Want to know a secret that will change your life and your perception of warmth? The clothing of the indigenous people of the plains was not just a set of skins, but a complex engineering system in which every layer, every tie, and every detail worked to retain heat. They didn't just wear fur garments, they understood the principles of thermodynamics on an intuitive level. Long before scientific explanations appeared, they knew that to live in harmony with the cold, you need to channel its power rather than fight it. That is why their clothing was not bulky but well thought out, creating a microclimate around the body similar to a closed thermos. The main principle, which is often ignored by modern people, was to wear fur on the inside, directly against the bare skin. The dense winter fur created thousands of microscopic air chambers directly on the surface of the skin, trapping the air heated by the body. These chambers worked like natural batteries, trapping heat and preventing it from escaping. The bison or deer skin, facing outwards, served as an impenetrable barrier against wind, snow, and icy gusts, which could blow the heat out of even a thick layer of clothing in a matter of minutes. This design was much more effective than a regular fur coat because it prevented cold air from circulating between the body and the fur. Special attention was paid to ensuring that the clothing did not fit too tightly. The loose fit left enough room for movement and warm air circulation inside. This layer of air was the main insulator, so clothing that was too tight could literally be deadly. Belts and ties were used strategically to regulate ventilation. They were tightened when a person was sitting or walking slowly, and loosened during active movement. This control system helped avoid the main enemy of survival in the cold: excessive sweating, which instantly turned the inside of the clothing into an ice pack. If the inside of the clothing became wet with sweat, it lost its insulating properties and began to cool the body. The indigenous people of the plains knew this better than anyone. Therefore, they carefully managed heat by opening or closing the collar, loosening the cords, or raising the hood. This dynamic system worked much better than any modern synthetic material because it was created by nature itself and adapted to the real climate, not laboratory conditions. Even on the harshest days, the clothing allowed the body to stay dry and therefore warm. Moccasins were sewn with a large allowance in size so that dry grass or moss could be stuffed inside as additional insulation. This natural filling created a soft cushion that retained heat around the foot. It also absorbed excess moisture, preventing the feet from getting wet. This insulation was changed regularly because keeping feet dry was a matter of life and death. Frozen feet meant loss of mobility, and loss of mobility on the winter plains meant death. Therefore, people always carried a supply of grass or moss to renew the insulation when it began to get wet. Neck scarves and high collars were used to protect the main blood vessels running through the neck. It is through these that the body loses a huge amount of heat, so proper protection of this area was critical. A collar tightly wrapped in fur acted as a valve, trapping heat in the chest and preventing cold air from penetrating the clothing. Hoods made of otter or beaver fur protected the head and ears, which lose heat particularly quickly. Their fur did not get wet from breathing and did not become covered in ice, a rare quality among winter materials. They also used special capes made from bison hides with thick winter undercoats, which were incredibly warm, heavy, and very durable. Such a cape, called a robe, was a versatile item. It could serve as outerwear, a blanket, a coverlet, and even a temporary shelter. This heavy, massive skin literally sealed the heat inside, preventing the wind from getting under the clothing. The robe was worn with the fur inside on the coldest days and with the skin outside in windy and wet snow conditions. The windproofness of the outer layer of leather was achieved through special tanning and smoking. The fats used in the processing made the material dense, elastic, and resistant to moisture. This allowed the clothing to last for years, keeping out the cold and retaining heat inside. The entire clothing system was modular, allowing layers to be quickly added or removed depending on activity, weather, and fatigue levels. People could adapt to any climate change in a matter of seconds. The tailors knew the anatomy of movement so well that it was as if they had studied it in special schools. The seams were positioned so as not to rub the skin or create pressure points that would disrupt blood circulation. They took great care to ensure that the skin remained soft in areas of flexion and that the fur did not clump together. Even with the most sudden movements, jumping, running, or riding, the clothing did not let in the cold or rub against the body. It was a technology born in a world where a mistake could cost a life. Millennia of experience, skills honed over generations, and natural intuition made this clothing ideal for survival in extreme conditions. Like this, if you are impressed by the sophistication of this ancient survival technology and how perfect the solutions were, created without science but with a deep understanding of nature. What if I told you that everything you believed about personal space doesn't work here? In everyday life, people are used to keeping their distance, protecting their bodies and their boundaries, but in the face of deadly cold, these rules crumbled like sand. Privacy, modesty, separation of space. All of this ceased to matter in the face of an element that could kill in a matter of minutes. Winter on the plains spared no one, and everyone who fell under its blow had to choose between discomfort and life. Therefore, the main resource was not the distance between people, but their ability to unite and become one body, one source of heat. A lone person in the steppe had far less chance of surviving a blizzard than a group of people who could combine their heat resources. One person lost heat too quickly, like a small lamp in the wind that could be extinguished by a simple gust. But several bodies, warmed by their internal fire and protected by a common shelter, turned into a powerful furnace, working on shared energy. The method of group sleeping, or piling up, was not a manifestation of strangeness or despair, but an effective system of preserving life based on the basic laws of heat exchange. The human body constantly emits heat, and when gathered together, it creates a source of energy capable of withstanding the night frost. People lay down on the prepared surface as tightly as possible, like pieces of a mosaic, trying to cover all the gaps through which cold air could penetrate. They lay side by side, back to back, intertwining their limbs to reduce the area of contact with the cold air. Everyone knew their place and understood that their neighbor's life depended on their position. The most vulnerable were placed in the center of such a group: children, the sick, the elderly, or those who were already shivering more than the others. The temperature was highest in the middle, which gave a chance to those whose strength was running out. The outermost places were occupied by the most enduring and strongest warriors, whose bodies retained heat better and could withstand the effects of the cold layers of air. They periodically changed places with the center so that the inner circle did not overheat and the outer circle did not freeze. It was a precise, regulated movement, like the breathing of a five-headed creature, where each breath was a change of position. Everyone covered themselves with a large shared skin or several robes connected to each other, creating a single large cocoon that trapped the heat inside. Under this common cover, the air temperature rose significantly higher than if everyone had covered themselves separately. The heat of many bodies added up, raising the overall level by tens of degrees. The humid but warm air, saturated with the breath of each participant, created a real microclimate in which even the harshest night could be survived. The gusts of icy wind that could freeze water instantly outside were not felt at all inside. The robe was as airtight as possible and retained heat thanks to the thickness of the thick bison hide. The breath of many people also played a huge role. The air coming out of their lungs was warm and moist, and in the enclosed space under the skins, It did not escape, but mixed with the general mass of air. This not only heated the shelter, but also slightly moistened the fur, making it even denser and heavier. This microclimate was much warmer than any single blanket. It was important to make sure that the moisture did not turn into a frosty crust, which could cause the people on the edges to become hypothermic. Therefore, sometimes they lifted the edge of the skin to ventilate briefly and then resealed the shelter. This method of spending the night required a high level of trust and discipline within the group. Everyone understood that their lives depended on their closest neighbor. No one was allowed to make sudden movements, get up, pull the blanket, or break the seal of the shared cocoon. One wrong move could let in a stream of icy air that would destroy all the accumulated heat exchange. It was similar to the behavior of herd animals, which instinctively huddle together in a tight ball to wait out bad weather, warming themselves with collective heat. Even two people lying back to back significantly increased their chances of survival. Heat was transferred through the spine, warming the kidney area and lower back, areas that lose energy particularly quickly. The combination of thermal contact and shared skin acted as a natural heat accumulator. This method allowed the body to conserve its own resources, as some of the heat came from outside, from the neighbor. This was especially important when it was impossible to build a fire due to wind, lack of firewood, or the fact that fire could attract enemies. Psychologically, such closeness also helped. People could feel the breath, warmth, and pulse of another person nearby. This prevented them from panicking, kept their minds alert, and helped them wait out the long, dark hours. People became a single organism, united by a common goal and a common history. Thus, huddled together in a tight cluster, the group could hold out until dawn or until the storm ended, even if the night was endless and freezing. How effective do you think this method of heating is compared to modern sleeping bags? In the next chapter, you will learn why the ground can kill faster than the wind and how people fought against it. The ground in winter is an endless heat absorber, capable of sucking the life out of a person faster than the frosty air. Direct contact between the body and frozen ground leads to conductive heat loss, which cannot be compensated for by metabolism. Therefore, the first task before spending the night was to create a reliable layer between the body and the icy surface of the steppe. If possible, the warriors gathered branches of shrubs, dry grass, or reeds to create an improvised mattress. This layer of vegetation created an air cushion, breaking the bridge of cold between the person and the ground. The branches were laid out in a special way, with the thick ends down, creating a springy and fairly thick base for the bed. The coarsest and thickest skins, often old bison robes that could be stained without regret, were spread over the branches. The tough, tanned bison hide was itself an excellent insulator, preventing moisture from seeping in from below. Sometimes horse saddles and blankets were used, placed under the most important parts of the body, the torso and pelvis. Particular attention was paid to insulation in the kidney and lung areas, where cooling could lead to fatal consequences. The snow under the bedding was compacted to a solid state so that it would not melt from the heat and wet the bedding. If there were no branches, they used their own belongings, shields, or any available items so as not to lie on the bare snow. Even a few centimeters of airspace could play a decisive role in maintaining body temperature. Experienced travelers knew that it was better to spend their energy looking for grass for bedding than to lie down on the bare ground. They often dug a hole in the snow down to the ground if there was dry grass from the previous year. The layered structure of the bedding worked in the same way as multi-layered clothing, trapping air and heat. The slightest carelessness in preparing a place to sleep could result in a person simply being unable to get up in the morning. This process of preparing a bed was a sacred ritual, performed methodically and carefully regardless of fatigue. It was the quality of the insulation from below that determined whether a warrior would be able to rest or would shiver from the cold all night. Without this foundation, all other measures, walls of snow and warm skins, lost half their effectiveness. Are you ready for the shocking truth that food is also a form of heating? We are used to thinking of food as something we need for energy and strength, but for the peoples who lived in the harsh conditions of the plains, it was a real internal fuel capable of replacing a fire. In a world where winter temperatures dropped so low that trees cracked apart, the only stove was the human body itself. And for this biological stove to work all night long, it needed high-quality, dense, and long-lasting fuel that would not fail at the most critical moment. Pemmican, a legendary product of the Plains peoples, became the ideal solution for the survivalists of the past. It was a concentrated mixture of dried and powdered meat mixed with melted fat. Sometimes berries were added to this mixture to extend its shelf life and add fast sugars. But it was the fat that played the main role, because its processing by the body is a slow process that takes hours and releases a huge amount of heat. It was a natural energy storage device, created long before the advent of modern energy bars. Warriors and hunters tried to eat a hearty meal before bed, filling their stomachs with this high-calorie mixture, similar to a small food bomb. As soon as the food entered the body, the process of thermogenesis began, the release of heat during digestion. The blood warmed up, saturating with heat, and carried it to all organs, creating the effect of an internal fireplace. Unlike fast carbohydrates, which give a short-term burst and end instantly, fat burned evenly, long and steadily, maintaining warmth throughout the night. Even a small piece of pemmican could replace a full meal in terms of calories, which was crucial on expeditions when resources were limited. However, pemmican was not the only remedy. The peoples of the plains also knew about the warming properties of certain herbs, roots, and resins. They could chew them during short breaks to stimulate internal heat. Such plants helped the body retain energy, improve stomach function, and increase blood circulation. This knowledge was passed down for centuries, and each tribe had its own set of winter plants that helped them cope with the cold. But even the most calorie-dense food was useless without enough water. A dehydrated body regulates temperature less effectively. Blood becomes thicker, the heart works harder, and heat is distributed more slowly. Therefore, despite the cold and snow around them, people tried to always have a small supply of water. They often melted snow in small leather vessels, using their own body heat or a barely noticeable flame. They knew that cold snow should not be drunk. It would take away heat rather than add it. Warm water, on the contrary, helped the body maintain its internal balance and use calories efficiently. They did not perceive food as a pleasure or a ritual, but as loading coal into a locomotive's furnace. It was an action on which their lives directly depended. The lack of food before a cold night sharply reduced their chances of survival. Without fuel, the body began to eat itself, consuming muscles and internal reserves, which led to rapid hypothermia. To prevent this, pemmican supplies were stored in special bags close to the body so that the fat would not turn to stone in the cold and remain ready for consumption. The ability to distribute rations correctly was a strategic skill. It was impossible to eat the entire supply at once, because it was unknown how many more days would have to be spent walking through the snow. But it was also dangerous to economize excessively. The body began to starve, and the internal furnace went out. Therefore, experienced warriors knew how to strike a balance, choosing the golden mean. They ate just enough to stay warm at night, but not so much as to leave themselves without reserves for the future. This internal combustion sustained life even when the external environment tried to freeze every cell in the body. A well-fed warrior could sleep peacefully, knowing that his internal fire would burn until dawn, warming and protecting him from the night cold. Food turned into heat, heat turned into life, and proper nutrition became as important as clothing, shelter, and survival skills. Have you ever noticed how the sensation of cold changes when you are hungry or full? In the next chapter, you will learn how stones replace central heating batteries. If you managed to build even a small fire before bedtime, it was used not only to simply heat the air around the camp. In the open prairie or in a winter forest, fire is an extremely capricious ally. The wind could blow out the flames, a blizzard could extinguish the coals, and a lack of fuel forced you to save every twig. Therefore, the heat provided by the fire could not be wasted. It had to be preserved and carried over into the night, just as a supply of pemmican carried energy into the body. For this purpose, medium-sized stones were used, sometimes slightly larger than a fist, sometimes as big as a head. They were placed right in the heart of the fire, in the hottest spot, and left there for tens of minutes or even an hour. Stones, especially granite or basalt, have high heat capacity. They accumulate heat slowly, but retain it for an incredibly long time, turning into nighttime batteries that continue to work long after the fire has gone out. But they had to be handled with care. A red-hot stone never touched the body or furs directly. It was always wrapped in thick leather, dry skin, or dense fabric, turning the fierce heat into a soft, even warmth. This prevented burns and made the heat transfer measured and long, allowing you to stay warm all night. Usually, such an improvised heater was placed in the foot area, because it is the feet and shins that freeze the fastest. Cold floors, poor blood circulation, and lack of movement made the feet the first area at risk. But sometimes a warm stone was placed on the stomach or chest. Large arteries passed through these areas, and warming the central part of the body increased the chance of maintaining a stable blood temperature. In a snow cave or small shelter, even a single hot stone could significantly raise the temperature in a confined space, creating a small oasis of warmth around a person. The stones were selected with great care. River stones were avoided because the moisture inside them turned into steam when heated, and the stone could explode right in the fire, showering everyone with hot fragments. Stones found on high ground, slopes, and hills were used. They were drier and safer. Such a stone became a real portable battery that could be taken under the skins, right into the bed. Sometimes dense clods of baked earth or dense pieces of wood were used, but they retained heat less well. Stone was ideal, durable, heavy, and reusable. Working with hot stones required experience. You had to be able to quickly grab the stone with wooden tongs or a pitchfork and turn it over so as not to burn your clothes or skin. Warriors knew how to place the stone so that the heat spread evenly and did not cause burns. By morning, the cooling stones could still be pleasantly warm, making it less painful to get out from under the blankets. Often, the stones were heated in advance, while still at the evening camp, in anticipation of a long cold night, so that this precious warmth could be carried along. This method allowed them to literally carry a piece of the powerful campfire flame into the cold night, hiding it under their skins like a fragile treasure. One or two carefully prepared stones could replace a whole pile of firewood that would otherwise have to be burned all night long. It was an environmentally friendly, economical, and incredibly effective solution. The same stones served people for weeks and even months, becoming not just a means of keeping warm, but part of a survival system. Thus, a simple cobblestone became a lifeline, a silent but reliable support that kept a person afloat in the icy sea of the night cold. Survival in immobility required active mental control of one's body and blood circulation. Warriors knew that if they stopped feeling their toes or fingers, it would be the beginning of the end. Even when half asleep, they periodically tensed and relaxed different muscle groups to get their blood flowing. It was like isometric exercises, tensing muscles without making any visible movements so as not to break the thermal cocoon. They clenched and unclenched their fists, moved their toes, and tensed their thighs and calves. These micro movements generated a little heat and prevented blood from stagnating in the peripheral vessels. It was important to ensure that no part of their clothing or equipment constricted their veins and arteries. If a limb began to go numb, it was not rubbed with snow, as many mistakenly advise, but warmed with body heat. Frozen hands were tucked under the armpits or in the groin, the warmest areas of the human body. They listened carefully to the signals of the body, not allowing themselves to fall into the dangerous, lethargic sleep of someone who is freezing. Controlling their breathing also helped regulate their heartbeat and remain calm, preventing vasospasm. They tried to breathe in the icy air through their noses so that it would warm up before reaching their lungs. Sometimes they used a scarf or the edge of their robes as a filter, creating a warm layer of air in front of their faces. This prevented the body from cooling down from the inside, which happens when breathing heavily through the mouth. These people had developed an incredible ability to sense their bodies. They could notice the slightest signs of hypothermia long before they became irreversible. It was a constant internal effort that did not stop for a minute throughout the night. The brain worked like the operator of a complex machine, constantly checking the indicators of all systems and adjusting them. Such conscious survival required enormous willpower and self-discipline. The sleeping warrior was always half awake, his guard center in the brain continuing to monitor the temperature. Fear and panic in a blizzard killed faster than low temperatures. When the world around them turned into a roaring white chaos, it was easy to lose their bearings and composure. The indigenous people of the plains perceived the storm not as an enemy, but as a living being, a spirit with which they had to coexist. They did not waste mental energy on self-pity or cursing the weather. Accepting the situation as it was allowed them to maintain clarity of mind and the ability to make rational decisions. The group often told stories or quietly sang songs to maintain morale and rhythm. The human voice was confirmation that life goes on, despite the fury of the elements outside. The monotonous sounds of the songs induced a light trance, helping to endure physical suffering and cold. They knew how to turn off their perception of pain and discomfort by focusing on images of warmth and home. Visualizing fire, hot food, and sunlight helped trick the brain and make the body work more efficiently. Waiting for dawn became a spiritual practice, a test of character and faith. They knew that every storm ends sooner or later, and their task was simply to wait for that moment. The absence of fuss and unnecessary emotions conserved the precious energy needed to generate heat. The elders taught young warriors to respect the cold, but not to fear it to the point of trembling. Confidence in their skills and knowledge gave them an inner strength that did not break in the wind. This psychological armor was as important as fur clothing. People supported each other with jokes, not allowing despondency to take hold of anyone's thoughts in the group. The collective mind of the group was tuned to one wavelength, the wavelength of survival. They believed that as long as the spirit was strong, the body would obey and stay warm. Victory over the storm was won first in the mind, and only then physically. The most dangerous moment was often the morning, when the storm subsided and it was necessary to leave the shelter. During the night, the body stiffened and cooled down, and the muscles became stiff and unresponsive. Getting up abruptly could lead to dizziness and loss of consciousness due to blood flow. Therefore, waking up was a slow process. First, they began to move their fingers, then their hands and feet. The warriors rubbed themselves and each other, restoring full blood circulation throughout the body. They had to carefully extricate themselves from the snow without collapsing the snowdrift on top of them. The first steps were difficult, like those of wooden dolls, until the joints warmed up. Checking each other for white spots of frostbite was a mandatory procedure immediately after getting up. If frostbitten areas were found, they were immediately warmed with the heat of the hands or breath, but not by rubbing. Clothes were tidied up, shaking out the accumulated snow and frost so that it would not melt and wet the skins. Breakfast, consisting of leftover pemmican, was necessary to kickstart the metabolism for the new day. Assessment of the situation, where to go, where the landmarks are, whether the storm is finally over. Often the landscape changed beyond recognition, and navigation skills were required to find the way. Breaking camp was done quickly and efficiently so as not to waste time. The snow caves were left behind, and they quickly disappeared in the wind, leaving no trace of human presence. This morning was a victory of life over death, another day won from the harsh elements. The experience of such overnight stays tempered their character and made the warriors incredibly resilient. They continued on their way, knowing that they were capable of surviving even the most terrible night. This confidence was evident in their eyes and movements, calm and measured. Survival was not a feat, but a way of life, an integral part of their existence on this earth. We see that the survival of Indian tribes in a blizzard was a complex system of knowledge passed down from generation to generation. It was a combination of engineering, biology, psychology, and a deep respect for nature. They did not have modern gadgets, synthetic fabrics, or burners, but they had something that we often lack: the ability to listen to the world around them. Every snowdrift, every skin, and every stone was used to maximum effect. Their ability to remain calm and still where others would panic is the main lesson for us. The history of these people reminds us that human capabilities are much broader than we are accustomed to thinking while sitting in warm apartments. Perhaps these ancient methods seem too harsh to you, but they are what allowed life to flourish on the icy plains. Which of the methods described do you think would be most difficult for modern humans to apply? Sleeping in close quarters or eating pure fat? Write in the comments what other topics about the survival of ancient peoples you would be interested in. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the amazing history of human resilience with us.